Mr. Chairman, do you mind turning your microphone on?
Be helpful? Yes. Good evening. Call the meeting to order. First, the approval of the minutes of the meeting of June the 15th and July the 6th, 2022. Could I have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to approve. And I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor and it's been properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Ayes have it. Motion carried. Next, we have the subdivision and land development, a final land consolidation and land development plan for the Mosaic project at 17 West Vine Street. Mosaic, it's affiliated with Willow Valley, propose a 20-story tower with 146 residential age-restricted units, which include a variety of on-set amenities, including private residential facility, restaurant, and retail space.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just have some brief comments to provide before we invite the developer up to provide some additional presentation. So this project was initially submitted to the Planning Commission as a sketch plan. Sketch plan typically is an early conceptual plan that's submitted to city staff for review to flag any major issues. That was submitted, gosh, I don't have the date offhand, but it was probably about a year and a half ago when we first saw the sketch plan. That provided staff to identify a number of important issues, and typically that is used as a method of waiving the preliminary plan process. Given the magnitude of this project being of historic size, this developer is also required to go through a preliminary planning process in addition to the sketch plan. Last year, this body acted on a conditional approval for the preliminary plan for Mosaic. The conditions staff has determined have been met or will be met through the conditions of approval presented this evening. So the plan that's before you tonight is the final plan. This is the third plan that they've submitted for this body's review. And I know that you're all familiar with this because I think that this is their fourth time at least being before the Planning Commission in this process. So thank you to the developer for being willing to engage in a more robust review process with the Planning Commission and with staff. So tonight, city staff is recommending a conditional approval for Mosaic. The project was proposed by Willow Valley. We've worked very diligently with the developer to resolve a number of technical issues in this plan. And I know that they've worked very hard to reduce the number of conditions given the how technical this particular project is. I'm happy to provide additional comment later on, and I'll have some questions of my own for the developer. But without further ado, I'll invite them to the podium to present to us. Thank you.
On? Can you hear it?
Yes.
Good evening. Craig Smith with RGS Associates, representing the Mosaic project on behalf of Willow Valley. And as Douglas had mentioned, we've been in front of the Planning Commission with this plan several times. The last time we were in front of you was on May the 18th. We actually stepped through the final plan and all the details associated with that. Mandeli has a layout plan of the configuration. And I'll make a few brief remarks on the plan. I really don't plan on going into too much detail because you have seen this several times before. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But again, this is a 20-story building that's being proposed on the site. The first 2 floors are amenity spaces, some of which were mentioned. The upper floors are 146 age-restricted apartments. And the main entrance is off of the south to Vine Street. There's an outdoor patio space at the corner of Queen and Vine. And then as you go up on Queen Street, there's another main entrance at an upper level up at what's called the Urban Plaza off of Queen Street. The Yates House is up in the northeast corner, which obviously will be retained. And then Mifflin Street to the rear is more of a back of house street, will remain as a city alley. Deliveries and that type of thing will occur on this north part of the building. And then lastly, we are proposing improvements to Beaver Street, which are pedestrian oriented. So we have pavers, some landscaping, some stormwater that occurs in Beaver Street. And the nice thing about the Beaver Street connection is it provides pedestrian connection from Southern Market all the way through Steinman Park up to the market. And so as a part of the project, and some of the just brief updates on what we've been working on, Mandela, if you could go back to the layout plan. We have been working with city staff on addressing some comments. A couple of those things were relative to bump outs that we're proposing on the corner of Mifflin and Queen Street, bump outs being pedestrian ways that makes the crosswalk shorter. So we're proposing that on Queen Street and Mifflin. There's another bump out that's proposed down at Beaver Street and Vine Street. So we have been working on that. We've been working on some revisions to lighting. We've been adding some benches. We've been adding some bicycle parking as a part of some of the comments. And largely what's left, and Douglas will, I'm sure, go over the conditions, are administrative. There's obviously financial securities that need to be posted. The agreements associated with the land development plan, the stormwater management facilities, the Beaver Street situation are all in process and will be provided to the city and the city solicitor prior to plan recording. So that in a nutshell is where we're at. I would be glad to answer any questions on about the project or relative to the project at this point.
You mentioned Beaver Street. You're going to do something with Beaver Street?
Beaver Street, yes. So Beaver Street right now is just a paved alley, essentially. There's a sidewalk that's adjacent to the LNP garage. There's some curbing that's out there. We're actually going to remove that and make it a very walkable. There's porous pavers that are proposed as a part of that. That's the hatched area that's up through the center there. And then we're providing crosswalks down at Vine Street to Southern Market that goes down to the bump out. And then further north, up at Mifflin Street, we're making the connection to where Steinman Park starts. And as a part of that, we are introducing some stamped asphalt. There's stamped asphalt that then goes out to Mifflin Street. So we're making this a very pedestrian connected space and a public oriented space. There are removable bollards on each side of Beaver Street, and that's for emergency services, but the intent is not for vehicles through Beaver Street. It's really a pedestrian oriented space.
Okay, thank you.
I want to continue the conversation about Beaver Street. So first question I have is this, and this might even be a question for Douglas, is Beaver Street going to remain a quote-unquote public street or alley, or is that no longer meeting those qualifications? Like, I'm a little confused because of condition 11 on the letter we received.
So Beaver Street, actually, through the process, we learned Beaver Street was vacated by the city in the 70s, I want to say. So technically, there's a property boundary that goes through Beaver Street. The western portion is actually owned by LNP, the garage side. The eastern portion is owned by Willow Valley. So there are easements associated with utilities, with stormwater management, and with public access that are going through that portion. So the status doesn't change. It's just there's easements to allow the pedestrian movements to occur in Beaver Street.
Okay,
The ownership doesn't change.
so it's not so much about like, I guess I'm just trying to make sure like the technical qualifications of it are still going to meet like that Saldo 16-foot width, for example.
Yeah, so we've gone through the process with all of that. And again, this is not city's property, but it is private property that has public access to it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So now, on this urban oasis area here, it says level 2. What does level 1 look like for that area? Like what can someone expect to see as they're walking down that?
So the
Alley.
reason it says level 2 is because, as you're all aware, Mifflin Street sits up here, Vine Street sits down here. It's connected by Queen Street. As you go up in elevation on Queen Street, and you can see the set of steps that are right in the front, it actually goes up even higher. The entrance to the urban plaza there is actually at the second floor elevation. So the Vine Street would be the first floor of the building. The second floor is accessed through the main access at the urban plaza. That's why it says second level on it.
Okay, so on Beaver Street then, like there's a set of stairs going up to that plaza area.
On Queen Street, correct.
Could we zoom out so I can see the full image real quick? Is that not a set of stairs on the left-hand side? I wish I could move your arrow, I'm sorry. Go directly to the other side where the urban oasis is.
Underneath where the bridge crosses. Right there.
Right there.
Right where your arrow is, right there. What is that? Does
So that actually goes down in elevation. That goes to the lower. So what happens with Beaver Street starts to climb in elevation. That set of steps actually goes down to the lower level. That's access at the lower level.
Okay, so I'm gonna go backwards. What can a pedestrian expect to see as they're walking up or down Beaver Street there? Like, is
So-
it concrete wall? Is it see-through glass?
If you start down at Vine Street and walk north, you're going to see a paved walkway. There's an elevator shaft that's proposed on the left-hand side that's associated with the garage. Obviously, the building's on the right-hand side. There's stormwater management that happens alongside the building that's essentially concrete troughs, but it's planted. Everything is planted in there. So there's plantings that are introduced in this section. Obviously, the garage stays the same. As you walk further north, there are existing utility vaults that obviously need to stay the same. And so the area is essentially kind of more of a plaza type area that you're going to walk through that has pavers that's going to make that connection from Market to the north down to Southern Market.
So will people on level 1 be able to see the pedestrians? So let me move forward to some other questions I have because it might explain why I'm asking these. Before I was a member of the commission, I remember attending some meetings related to this project, and a concern brought up by multiple commissioners was the safety of the alley. And the comment about what is being done to mitigate safety concerns is cameras. And the conversation more towards so cameras are great, but they're not a preventative measure. Like, if something happens, it still has happened. I'm trying to understand the dynamics between the inside and outside of the building on that area for the sake of public safety, and what can maybe still be done to mitigate concerns about public safety without totally transforming the entirety.
Yeah, so on the proposed building side, there's really the only thing that's happening is there's 2 points of access. And Mandali, I don't know if you can show where the triangles are up on the right side of Beaver. You go up, there's point of access, and then there's a point of access right there for residents. But remember, the lower levels are not residential units. They're some of what's happening here is actually back of house types of things. And then as you get down further south to the Vine Street area, there's a pool that's right in there. So there will be some windows that are surrounding some of the pool area. And again, there's plantings and there's screenings that are happening. There's not a whole lot of things happening on the Beaver Street building side, put it that way. As far as access, activity, a lot of it, especially as you get to Mifflin Street, is utilitarian. There's a lot of utilities happening in Beaver Street.
My concern, just, at the last meeting, I expressed a lot of concerns about the urban fabric. My concern is that this alley will be viewed as unsafe, and despite the improvements to make it pedestrian friendly, like engineering wise, it's not going to actually make it encouraging to utilize. And whether you're a resident of the city feeling discomfortable or feeling uncomfortable using that alleyway, or you're a resident concerned about using it for the lack of visibility, like feeling like there's nobody there to see something if something were to happen. And again, I understand cameras as a reactive measure to monitor incidents if they should occur, but I think this is something we should still be concerned about, is the safety of the alley and how we might be able to make it something where there is some interaction between the general public and the residents in some way, shape, or form. I'm not talking about like a major construct here, but just something that can be done to encourage activity.
So the other thing to point out, there is lighting through there. So it's not a whole lot different than some of the other spaces in the city. And I will say too, obviously, Willow Valley wants to keep their residents and everyone else safer in and around the building. So, it's not necessarily, we designed it to be as safe as possible, put it that way. And beyond that may be a policing issue or something to that effect.
Okay. Well, now move on from Beaver Street. The only major question I have otherwise is, are there any intentions for what's going to go on in the historic building, like the use of that building at this time?
I don't know if that's been determined at this time. It's at this point to stay as it is. Obviously to remain as the Yates House. I don't think that's been established yet.
Okay, so it could be any number of uses at this
It
point.
could be, but I don't think that's been established.
Thank you.
Have a question?
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Smith. My question is about the traffic on Vine Street. I live and work, and my mother lives a block away from there. I've done the math, about the equivalent of 2 years of my life just on that street alone, waiting for those lights to turn. There's no left signals on Queen, and definitely none on Prince. And I can sit through 3 or 4 rotations of lights just waiting to get through that intersection. Is there a traffic study being done for that street?
There's not a traffic study that's required as a part of the central business
Okay.
district.
So this is more of a Douglas question.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Douglas. I didn't mean to
I'll just echo that. Yeah, the land development plan exempts certain parts of the city from submitting a traffic study, and those are primarily areas in the downtown area. So there certainly still a robust pedestrian, bike, and other safety analyses of the intersections. And actually, I just want to mention we have our city engineer, Cindy McCormick, here this evening. Thank you for being here, Cindy. In case any questions do arise about the public sphere or these kinds of traffic or pedestrian safety connections, she can also weigh in. But it's not required here. Part of the reason is, and Cindy I'm sure could be much more eloquent than me on this, but traffic studies are often looking at a level of service on streets, which really is a measure of congestion and speed. In the downtown, we want to be careful about there not being high speeds, and we want to be much more attentive to designs around pedestrians and cyclists in the downtown core. I think we've found that the traffic studies are helpful in certain scenarios, not so helpful in other scenarios, like in the downtown. I know that we do traffic light timing updates regularly to make sure that intersections are flowing smoothly. I'm happy to, if there's other questions for Cindy, we can defer to her too.
Definitely. So I see 146 units coming in. That's going to be a lot more. Yeah, a lot more traffic.
Yeah, certainly. Potentially, there is a lot more traffic here, and my understanding is they'll be parking in the Vine Street parking garage.
Correct.
Parking is not a requirement within this area, but it is being provided by the developer. I think, Craig, maybe you could just say a little more about what daily activities will look like on site regarding traffic
Sure.
in terms of deliveries, drop-offs,
Yeah.
et cetera.
So, as Douglas mentioned, the parking garage to the west, there are 250 parking spaces allocated for Willow Valley residents. And then from a traffic perspective, obviously the main drop-off point is down on Vine Street. We have been through the traffic commission to make sure that's a safe condition. One of the things that we did that I think is beneficial from a safety perspective is actually removed the on-street parking on the north side of Vine Street. So there's clear sight lines. And then obviously the more delivery type vehicles will access at Mifflin Street. Mifflin Street is a one-way street that runs west to east. So there's the ability for, a trash truck or something to that to come in there, actually back into the building. There's a dock there, and then leave, go back out Queen Street. And that's more of what's happening on the north side of the building.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
When you say delivery vehicles, has any consideration been made for the parking requirements for like just an individual's food delivery by chance? Like let's say someone gets a DoorDash.
Not specifically, no. No,
Okay.
there's not that designated. I mean, that the drop-off could be used as part of that.
Okay. Douglas, is there any way to make sure there is some sort of accommodation for like a food delivery or whatnot vehicle? Just because I know that can bog up traffic, potentially even bog up traffic in the pull through there. Like as someone who does this myself, I've experienced a lot of situations where it gets pretty ugly pretty fast from a clutter of vehicles.
So we don't have a provision in the saldo that would require providing some kind of pull-off area. But on this site, there are a couple of opportunities. So certainly in the drop-off area, I just want to note that that area is definitely wide enough for there to be two cars easily that pass side by side. So if there is double parking or something that needs to take place there, in fact, you could even have one car dropping off some person, one car, an Uber parked parallel to that person, dropping someone else off, and a third car that can still easily pass through there. So I think they've designed the drop-off area to be fairly flexible for traffic movements. On the Queen Street side, Craig, maybe you want to say a little bit about, I believe that there was a drop-off area that was reserved there as well, am I right?
Well, there previously was a drop-off area
Okay.
that was more toward the entrance to the Urban Plaza. That has been removed from the plan.
Okay. And that was in an effort to preserve on-street parking and
It was.
and
yeah.
redesign of that
Yeah,
mid-block
so
crossing.
to retain some on-street parking there rather than designating that purely as Willow Valley.
So it sounds like the primary area for temporary deliveries really would be that drop-off area. If like deliveries from Amazon and other sorts of services, would that be the place that you
I think so.
expect? Okay.
And again, there's plenty of space and turning movement for that to occur.
Thank you.
All right. The adjoining the garage owner's LMP, correct? Sorry, that was directed towards Douglas, but it could be answered by you as well, I think.
It's owned by a Steinman affiliate. I think Steinman Real Estate. I forget the full name. SREG is the abbreviation of the landowner.
Okay. So, Douglas, with the alleyway there, what I'm thinking about is how the city can actually encourage some sort of commercial activity, such as maybe like a food truck, because like it with the structure as it is put forward and with the parking garage on the other side, there's not really a whole lot of room for additional construction, for example, to be done. Is there a conversation that can be had by bringing both of these property owners to the table, since it is a private alley, to somehow have a system where we can permit food trucks or other small commercial vehicles to encourage a use of that alley by pedestrians?
There's no, there would not be a mechanism for us to require that. It being a private alley, they could certainly use it in a way that respected the public easement that we'll be signing. I guess we could look at the public easement to make sure that there could potentially be some kind of maybe event space there. I could work with Cindy to think through that. But I don't, just from my own perspective, I don't really see that as the best commercial opportunity on this site. This project is maximizing activity at the corner of the site with the outdoor patio and restaurant facility along Queen Street by offering retail opportunities there, and eventually the Yates House, which we hope will be put to good use and activated in a unique way as well. So with all that said, I really, we see Beaver Street or the alleyway as really primarily being, a pedestrian thoroughfare to get from point A to point B. Not to say that it isn't a destination of itself. We hope, and we think it will be designed well with landscaping and lighting. We've worked with the developer to try to identify some of those opportunities for, safer and more pleasant walk through there, and we're very excited that that is remaining open to the public and continuing a connection between Southern Market and Central Market as well.
Yeah, okay. No, I get what you're saying. I think part of the reason why my mind goes to somehow figuring out how we can give more opportunity to vendors who are in vehicles, even though there is an additional retail space here, is because sometimes business models do better when they're able to be mobile. And that mobility and sometimes that temporary nature can be appealing depending on the nature of the business, whether it's food or just items for sale. So it would be pretty interesting if something could be done in the future, if a conversation could be fostered between Willow Valley and the Steinman Foundation or the Steinman entity that owns the other building, that we could figure out how to provide people an alternative business opportunity that's not exclusively renting a space.
Well, and then Tony, with Southern Market right next door, there'll be lots of opportunities. There are lots of opportunities there too, and it's all connected in a sense. It'd be like food trucks, but they're already there.
Well, no, I get that, but so I'm personally very concerned about how just having it feels like a void in that alley, and so figuring out ways to create opportunity there, I feel would be important to increasing the economic development and public safety of the city overall. And you're right, though, Southern Market is going to provide opportunities as well. I think it's just all about how can we continue to think outside of the box and maximize what is coming before us.
Thank you. And anything else, Mrs. Smith?
I don't have anything else.
May I ask a question about the construction process?
Sure.
And this might not be in the purvey of the Planning Commission, but what can we expect with maybe road closures, sidewalk access, things like that?
So I'm going to have Bill Koch address that question.
Right, Bill Koch, Junior, Pre-Construction Manager, CCS Building Group. To answer your question, road closures, site closure. So the site itself, the entire block here obviously would get a site fence around the perimeter. We have planned an entry, site access entry on Vine Street. And we will include some road closures, mostly for utility work in Vine Street and in Queen Street. We would foresee that Mifflin Street would also likely, at least for a period of time, be closed. It's a one-way. The building footprint is kind of right on the edge of the street where it currently is. The new building footprint follows, right in line there. So Yeah, there would be, intended to be road closures, at least at some point in time, really on all three public streets, Vine, Queen, and Mifflin. So, yes, that's,
Anything else, Mr. Cope?
no.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just add that our Public Works Department does do a thorough review of these projects during the construction phase. So after this plan is approved, and I'm sure as building permits are getting pulled, we would be working closely with the developer on identifying alternative routes for pedestrians. You know, we've tried to be vigilant about providing like barricaded pedestrian ways alongside a sidewalk if the sidewalk has to be closed. Of course, there's sometimes opportunities to provide, you know, overhead protection and maintain the sidewalk. So, you know, we can certainly get into that. Those construction provisions are not included in land development plans, but I do certainly appreciate the question and recognize, you know, the impacts that this will have for some period of time as we bear with construction.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cope.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I have just a couple of questions. I just want to confirm for both the Commission's understanding and just our common understanding that the alley access, Beaver Alley, is intended to, you know, be open to the public at all times of day, is my understanding. There's bollards that will be there to prevent vehicles from accessing that area. There are a number of agreements that we still have yet to, you know, fully review, and which we know will need to be recorded alongside this land development plan. But just wanted to confirm our common understanding that that alley access easement would detail provisions around it remaining open. There not being gates there, you know, the bollards sort of being sufficient for provisions of keeping vehicles out that are unwanted, but otherwise would essentially function as a fully public alley. And welcome, you know, any other team members' response to that too.
What's that? Sure.
Good evening. John Swanson, CEO, Willow Valley Development. To answer your question, yes, it will be open 24/7 for pedestrian access. And I just want to get back to the question regarding safety on that block, because if you think about the condition that exists today, I mean, it's dark. Most of the lighting is no longer operable on that street. There's no activity on the former production site side of things. This is going to be active site going forward with significant lighting in addition to our own security that we'll be providing. So it's going to be significantly upgraded in terms of security from the condition that exists today with the level of activity. There is a terrace area there that will be utilized by the residents of Mosaic. So there'll be activity outside bordering right on that alleyway. So I think you're going to see a significant improvement in terms of the security. People walk that alleyway now, very dark, no activity. You've got the vacant building on the east side. So this will be totally transformed. And I did want to respond to the question regarding traffic. I'm a former resident, 7 years, lived on South Duke, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I travel Vine Street all the time. Although we weren't required to do a traffic study in this situation, we've done significant traffic studies in West Lancaster Township for our projects there. And we've documented and shown in West Lancaster that our residents are not traveling in large numbers during peak times of travel. Okay, they're primarily no longer employed, getting up, going out 7:30 in the morning, getting on the road. Their travel is more significant during the off-peak travel times. So I think that will mitigate some of the concerns that may exist if this were not an age-qualified type of community. Sorry, Mr. Smith, to sort of digress, but I was like wanting to get up and respond to a couple of those comments.
No apologies needed. Thank you for the additional information.
Mr. Swanson, I appreciate your getting up and speaking, and I agree with you. I think that the improvements are going to be better than the current conditions. I'm glad that you mentioned the terrace, because I think what I'm trying to get at is that my hope, because regardless of how we intend and how things plan, like things can always go a different way.
Mhm.
And my hope is that these assumingly new residents who then do spend time on the terrace and are looking down at the alley, for whatever reason, like I just want the people who move to our city to look down then and be like, that's where I want to be. I want to be out here with the people. Like I moved to Lancaster for these unique aspects, these little quirks. And I think that in the long run, this alley can still provide an opportunity for that.
We've been very intentional in the design and programming of this building to engage with city residents and the city. So there's numerous public spaces. The lobby is open to the public. Individuals can walk into the lobby. They can't get to the private residence floors. We have multiple dining venues that'll be available to the public. Retail space off of Queen Street that'll be available to the public, and including that terrace area on Queen Street adjacent to the Jasper Yates house. That's open to the public. So we've been very intentional about engaging with the city. We don't want to be this walled off building that nobody can ever go into it or see it. We want to be engaged. That's part of the attraction for our prospects to an urban living arrangement is to engage with the city and be a part of the city fabric. So we've been very intentional about doing that and making sure that that's part of our program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Is there any other comment?
We don't.
You good? Okay.
We're good.
Commissioners, any comment, any other comment from the commissioners? Any comment from the public? Okay, I guess we're ready for the vote.
Mr. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we can review the conditions of approval briefly just before the vote, for the developer's understanding as well as your understanding. So previously, this plan received several modifications for the plan. So tonight, those are not a part of the vote since they were taken care of in the preliminary plan stage. Tonight, we do have 7 proposed conditions. The first one is that the final plan and related construction documents must comply with all city codes and regulations unless specifically modified or waived. That's just a standard condition for our plans. Second one, the developer shall enter into a final plan developers agreement. These conditions will be part of the development agreement. So the developers agreement will set out some conditions around ongoing inspections, release of financial guarantee, et cetera. Given the size of this project, we anticipate needing to hire a third-party engineering firm to do some regular inspections during construction, just to make sure that things are proceeding according to the plan. So part of there would be a reimbursement process that we would work with you on through the project construction. That's all detailed in the developer's agreement, as well as these conditions. Third one, the developer shall make a payment in lieu of planting for the required street trees. We know that there were a number of trees that couldn't be met on site given the tight conditions, but I think city staff ended up being very happy with the number of trees that did make it on site, but of course some were removed that weren't able to be replaced here, or will be removed. Number 4, all easements and agreements shall be submitted for review by the city and recorded as part of the plan recordation. There are a number of easements that are detailed in the plan. Those are the ones that would need to be submitted. In addition to the access easement for the alley, for instance, I think there's utility easements, there's stormwater easements. Many of these are within Beaver Alley between SREG and Mosaic, as well as the stormwater operations and maintenance agreement. And there may be others as well. Those would all have to be submitted for review and ultimately recorded with the plan. The 5th condition, the developer shall submit a financial guarantee in accordance with the approved opinion of probable cost prior to the final plan recording. I think we have one actually that we've maybe already endorsed. We've kept this as a condition just in case there's any final changes here tonight or anything that wasn't caught. And actually that should be, Mandela, if you don't mind making the correction of probable instead of probability. Yeah. Number 6, this is one that we actually just caught. We should include revised conditions for the resultant lots shall be recorded as part of the plan, as part of this plan approval. I'm sure you are already anticipating doing that, and you probably have deeds drafted, but I just want to make sure that those get recorded alongside the development plan. Are there any questions from commission members about these conditions? Are these conditions acceptable to the development team?
They are.
Okay. Of course, you do have, I think it's 30 days after any action by the commission, if they conditionally approve to contest any of the conditions. And then there's other procedures that can be discussed at that time. So it's with these conditions that city staff recommends approval of the Mosaic final land development.
I do have one question.
Please.
Anticipated construction start date, perhaps?
I'm going to have to go to John for that one.
Okay. Mr. Swanson.
Thank you. Don't have a firm date
Right.
at this point. The way we move forward with the project is we get a significant number of the apartments under a agreement, which can be cancelable, fully refundable deposit, and so forth. But we need a reasonable pre-sale prior to starting construction. So construction start is basically based upon that. Our hope is that we would be in the ground by this time next year, which would mean demo work, early 2023, but that is dependent upon sales pace. The other variable, which everybody here in the room is fully aware of, is the whole economic environment that we're in terms of engaging subcontractors, getting pricing that will hold on a project of this size. size. So we're kind of working through those issues as well. And with the inflationary pressures, with everything that's going on, workforce shortages, things like that, we're trying to work our way through with our subcontractors, many of which we've done work with in the past. But everybody's faced with kind of challenges today that they've not had to navigate through in the past. So there's some variables in here that will affect the start date. But I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I mean, I'm excited to get rolling, basically. So we've got a sense of urgency amongst our team to get our sales where they need to be, get our construction costs where they need to be, and get going on it. So hopefully by this time next year, you see something happening out there.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just have a few closing remarks, just maybe for context for the commission. Staff has been working for quite a long time on this project, so I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't add that this has been a really robust review. And I'm very happy with staff too, and the ways that they committed to this project and seeing it through and being very, very detail oriented. Very early on in the process, we met with emergency services as well to review this project. In fact, I think we talked about even interior design issues and to just think about emergency services responding to the building. So I was very happy that we did that with our fire chief as well. This project also pivoted partway through its design to accommodate even more on-site stormwater management to help meet the city's goals of reducing its combined sewer overflows in the Conestoga. There are a number of green facilities on site that really, make this a unique building in the city. More green roof than I think we have on maybe any other building in the city would appear here. I also want to compliment the staff in being receptive to our comments about the urban realm and streetscape design. That's often one of the toughest parts of a project, and I think that this project really ultimately did a great job balancing everything in the public right of way, from pedestrian safety to street tree design, width of sidewalk, bike facilities, access points, visibility, et cetera. And not only that, but there was opportunity to connect with adjacent sites at Southern Market, extending the crosswalk to the south, thinking about pedestrian connectivity through the site, adding a bump out on Queen Street to shorten crossing distances to the convention center as well. And ultimately, this project really very solidly extends our downtown, an additional block south, and brings much needed development and attention to the intersection of Vine and Queen. We have the convention center, we have Southern Market, and I'm just waiting for the other corner to ultimately contribute to that revitalization. So I want to just thank the development team and city staff for all the work that went into this plan and the conditions of approval. So
Ditto. So I guess we're ready for the vote. Motion? Do we have a motion?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the subdivision and land development, final land consolidation and land development plan for the Mosaic project at 17 West Vine Street, and taking into account the 6 recommendations of the Planning Bureau.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is 5 full-time planning commission members. We have 2 who are alternative members who do not vote if there's a quorum already achieved. It's just for public knowledge.
opposed? Opposed, none. Hearing none. Motion carried.
We just want to thank the city, we want to thank city staff, and obviously the planning commission, all the input. It's been a process, but we're really appreciative of that process. I think you're going to see an awesome project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, next we have Housing Subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there's any additional business for the Housing Subcommittee this evening.
Comprehensive Plan update.
Yes, happily. So a couple of things I want to bring your attention to, and I'm going to do that on the computer here briefly, if you don't mind, Mandeli. So if you have not yet visited this website, please do so. This is our comprehensive plan website. And on here, there's a documents section. And we have just posted, I was actually a duplicate here, but we have just posted some recent documents for you to review. Happy to go through this in detail maybe at a future meeting, but there's an engagement report here which details really the last year of public engagement for the comprehensive plan. There's also a draft Lancaster Today report, which is an existing conditions report. I think it's like 140 or 170 pages or something, so you can make it your bedtime reading if you'd like. And then we also have what we're calling our deliberative forum packet. And this is a packet of information that's being provided to residents actually for this weekend. I thought I'd spend just a moment highlighting this. A deliberative forum is it's an innovative way to practice democracy and make decisions as a group, and it's increasingly popular in cities around the world. We're partnering with Franklin and Marshall on holding a deliberative forum, and we are asking them to give us input on the comprehensive plan. So we have randomly selected 33 residents throughout the city, along with the assistance of the Center of Opinion Research at FNM. They sent out, I think, 700 some letters to different residents, and the intent was to find a group of residents that were statistically representative of the city of Lancaster demographics, racially, by ethnicity, by educational attainment, and by geography and age. So we have a really interesting mix of people who don't necessarily have any planning expertise, but they were willing to sign up for this. They are being compensated for their participation and for a full day's work this Saturday. And we're providing food and childcare and language access services if needed. And they've been given this packet of information, and it goes through all kinds of interesting topics like regional planning and the environment, and tries to break down some complex topics into hopefully very simple graphics and information so that these residents can learn a bit about our city and the kinds of things that we consider in planning, including things like zoning and this useful graphic about what zoning considers, like side lot lines and curbs and sidewalks, etc., as well as smart growth principles and what we consider in the development of a project. There's also a chapter on housing and transportation. There is a section on economic development and equity as well. And then each of the teams will be designated a site. This packet, for instance, focuses on our county prison site. We picked 6 major redevelopment sites across the city, and we're asking this group of 33 residents to make recommendations about what these development areas should look like going forward. So when the county prison closes on King Street and relocates outside the city, that will become a very important redevelopment site in the city, a full city block. So these residents will be looking at all of these sites from the three lenses I mentioned, the regional planning and environment, housing and transportation, and then economic development and equity. We're very excited for this opportunity. So I'll be sharing more information, I hope, at a future meeting, but just wanted to let you know we continue to be hard at work on the comprehensive plan, and I encourage you to check out the documents section on planningourfuturelancaster.com.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Sure.
Next, other business.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did forget one other item under the comprehensive plan update, and that is that tonight we have another land use planning exercise. What I would suggest is that we're live streaming this meeting right now, but unfortunately, this activity is really best done around the table with face-to-face conversation. For anyone in this room who wishes to participate or listen in, you're welcome to do so. This is a public activity. So the goal this evening is to work through a land use exercise for the northwest quadrant of the city. This is the fourth quadrant we've focused on so far. We're going around the entire city and doing this. And tonight we'll be looking at opportunities for housing improvements, transportation improvements, parks and rec, redevelopment sites, and a number of other things. These exercises get factored into our comprehensive planning process and ultimately will contribute to our future land use map, policies, and our official map. So I would suggest, for the sake of those streaming, we probably should terminate the streaming. Unfortunately, because it's not very useful if none of us have microphones around the table. And we did get a call from a resident last week wondering why we were having a meeting that no one could hear anything during. So the public meeting will continue. We're here as a quorum, so this will be just a recommendation exercise that's non-binding. There's no decisions to make, but we technically are still holding a public meeting when we convene around this table. So I just want to make that clear. The public meeting will continue beyond the streaming. So thank you for those of you who might have tuned in. Yes.
Would we be better to officially finish the meeting and then do the exercise, just so we're not ongoing a meeting while we're offline?
Yeah. So it certainly is not an obligation that we stream this meeting for it to be a legal meeting. The challenge here is that if this group meets as a quorum and discusses anything related to the business that it conducts, I would argue to be prudent that we should consider this part of the business of the Planning Commission, since it is a policy setting exercise. So it will need to be part of our public meeting, I think by sunshine law. We're still operating within our advertised meeting, and we'll have to conclude the meeting officially after the exercise is done.
May I propose we move the public participation up in the agenda, perhaps? Do I need to make that as a motion?
I don't think so, but I'll let the chairman weigh in on that if that's all right. I certainly don't see a problem.
Yeah, I can agree with that. That for now, we'll have the public participation, and then, so is there any from the public? None? Okay.
All right, let's move around the table.